2020 started with Australia on fire, literally. On January 2nd, a state of emergency was declared in parts of the country being ravaged by wildfires. What's now being called Australia's Black Summer started in September of 2019 and went on into February of this year, killing dozens and forcing thousands from their homes.
More than 26 million acres of land were destroyed. That's an area larger than the whole state of Kentucky. And experts say it could take decades for scorched areas to recover. And then a sharp escalation of tensions between the U.S. and Iran. On January 3rd, U.S. forces killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike in Iraq.
Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him.
A United Nations investigator later said the killing violated international law. 5 days after Soleimani's killing, Iran launched a series of ballistic missiles targeting bases that held U.S. military in Iraq. No Americans were killed, but more than 50 suffered brain injuries. And hours later, Iran said it unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian passenger plane taking off from Tehran, killing 176 people on board. Then, after 47 years of membership, Britain officially began their exit from the European Union on January 31st, when the image of a countdown clock projected onto Prime Minister Boris Johnson's residence struck 11 p.m. By then, a novel coronavirus was spreading around the world. The largest cities shut down, historic sites empty. It would change the way everyone lived and kill 1.5 million people this year.
But while you may have been focused on COVID, there were still massive stories playing out around the world. Here are a few.
After months of pro-democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong last year, on June 30th, China passed a national security law that now allows Beijing to set up police units in the city to punish crimes considered a threat to the mainland. The day after China's President Xi Jinping signed the law, thousands protested in the streets of Hong Kong, where police made over 300 arrests, 10 of them under the new law. Some of the crimes included in the law carry the maximum penalty of life in jail. In July, a student-led protest movement picked back up in Thailand, calling for big changes to the constitution and reforms to the monarchy. Thousands of high school students joined forces with college students and other pro-democracy demonstrators to stage mass rallies around the country that went on for months. At this Bangkok protest in November, Thai police can be seen deploying water cannons into a crowd of protesters. On August 4th, a massive explosion in Beirut, Lebanon, killing over 200 people and injuring thousands, and destroying the surrounding area. A warehouse fire ignited 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at a Beirut port. According to their prime minister, the stockpile had been there for 6 years without preventative measures to protect it. The blast came as the country was already buckling under economic and political turmoil, and brought on a new wave of unrest. On August 9th, President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, extended his 26-year rule in a landslide election, which was immediately denounced by the international community as fraudulent. As his opponents were detained and forced to flee the country, hundreds of thousands of Belarusians took to the streets to protest. Belarusian state police beat and jailed thousands of protesters and blocked social media and news websites. Lukashenko's natural ally is Vladimir Putin, but amid the current protests, it appears that ties are fraying. In November, the Russian foreign minister traveled to Belarus to discuss an orderly transition of power, and the next day, Lukashenko announced that he would step down after a new constitution is adopted. On September 15th, the Prime Minister of Israel met with the foreign ministers of Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates at the White House to sign an historic agreement normalizing relations between the three countries for the first time. The Abraham Accords, brokered by President Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner, outline several cooperative initiatives that enable free travel between the three nations. Since then, 2 more majority Muslim countries have signed similar peace agreements with Israel in return for strategic diplomatic gains. Sudan was removed from the list of state sponsors of terrorism for its deal, and the Kingdom of Morocco secured a recognition of sovereignty over the Western Sahara. However, many criticize these moves for failing to sufficiently address the Israel-Palestine conflict. On September 27th, fighting broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the long-disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. The region was occupied by a majority of ethnic Armenians, over 100,000, and has tried to declare independence with the backing of Armenia throughout decades of conflict. Despite de facto Armenian rule, the region falls within Azerbaijan's internationally recognized borders. After 44 days of deadly fighting, killing thousands, most of the land was handed over to Azerbaijan in a Russia-brokered deal. The deal sparked celebrations in Azerbaijan and widespread unrest across Armenia. Many Armenians previously living in the region were displaced. Here's what one previous resident told NBC News.
I woke up like in a war. I will not be able to go back to my home, to see my friends there, living there, to see the places where I grew up, to see my school.
On the night of October 20th, a protest in Nigeria turned deadly when government security forces opened fire on demonstrators, killing 12 people in what has become known as the Lekki Massacre. The protests were a continuation of a movement called #EndSARS, which aimed to disband the SARS, a national police unit which has carried out decades of human rights abuses, torture, and even extrajudicial killings. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari agreed to disband SARS, but the protests, inspired by Black Lives Matter in the U.S., have grown to encompass the larger issue of police brutality and corruption in Nigeria. An estimated 51 civilians and 18 security forces have been killed in the unrest.
And of course, that's not everything that happened around the world this year. Bolivia's Socialist Party won in a historic presidential election. In Russia, opposition figure Alexei Navalny was poisoned. Greece and Turkey clashed over maritime borders.
A rebellion in Ethiopia's Tigray region spiraled into a massive refugee crisis.
And just this month, farmers across India are protesting new laws liberalizing agricultural markets. 2020 will be remembered as the year of the pandemic, and its effects will be felt for years to come. But a lot more happened around the world this year, suggesting that the 20s are shaping up to be a decade of change.
Well, it's the relief we have all been waiting for months. Congress has come to an agreement, they haven't passed it yet, on the next economic stimulus package. Now, many people are asking, what is so special in this deal that we couldn't have gotten months ago? Because the American people, American businesses have been struggling for months. The short answer is nothing. It just took this long for Congress to come to an agreement. When the CARES Act first passed months and months ago, we saw a lot of stimulus into the system, and we saw some level of economic recovery. Now, the House then passed the HEROES Act. Unfortunately, the Senate didn't touch it. And if the House and the Senate don't agree on it, it doesn't get anything to the American people. But now we are seeing some support. We're seeing direct stimulus payments, direct checks to Americans who earned $75,000 or less last year. They're going to be getting $600. That's a lot less than the $1,200 payments earlier this year, but at least it's something. We're also seeing an extension and an expansion of federal unemployment benefits. That rent moratorium, many people who were worried about being evicted at the end of this year, that's going to be extended too. One of the big issues, these extensions are only going to take us to mid-March. Mid-March will not be when the United States is on the other side of COVID. We're not going to likely get the vaccine until this summer. So that leaves so many people wondering, this is good, but what's going to happen a few months from now? It's very good for industries like the airline industry that got a carve out, museums, live events, movie theaters, they got their own carve out deals. The restaurant industry did not. That's a big concern for those small businesses, many that are closing by the day. But at least for now, this is something, we just got to get it signed.